Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy Heroes. At long last, we have Crosshair in the game, so it is time for a talk video. We're breaking down the kit for Crosshair Scarred, looking at the insights, the tips, doing our kit breakdown, and then gear and squad quick looks at those. Crosshair arrives as a light side Bad Batch attacker. I think thematically most of this could be anticipated. He's a big damage dealer, no surprise there. Benefits from more stacks of target practice and gets rid of shaken stacks with the target practice stacks. With the strategy tips, start with the new stacking debuff. Shaken sounds like an exclusive to him kind of deal, and there are multiple ways to remove stacks of Shaken. Correct use of his kit eliminates those stacks. Second special, target secure, can deal high damage, scales with the number of turns taken by him and the enemies before this ability is used, and that may be a modding clue. This is one of those kits where we are going to start with the unique ability. It's going to inform our understanding of all of the attacks. So unique, it's in my head. This is a Zeta and Omicron ability. At the battle start, Crosshair gains 200% defense for 3 turns and is inflicted with 20 stacks of Shaken. So we're getting a little bit of survivability while he is weaker at the beginning of the battle. When Crosshair gains a stack of target practice, he removes 1 stack of Shaken and gains 15% turn meter. Stacks of target practice should come pretty easily, so that should be a fairly effective means of gaining both turn meter and removing the stacks of Shaken. Whenever all stacks of Shaken are removed, Crosshair self-cleanses all debuffs and takes a bonus turn. If targeting a marked enemy, he gains 100% accuracy. I think that's meant to be included as part of that whenever, but CG is not always consistent with how they write this stuff out. If there are no GLs, Crosshair ignores protection. Shaken, our new debuff, that's minus 10% accuracy. I would assume that's per stack, and that persists through defeat. Now with Shaken, we have an accuracy mechanic, which was hinted at in an earlier kit. I think it was Fugitives. But what I was hoping for when that was originally hinted at was a reason for accuracy arrows to exist. I thought that was going to be an opportunity. It is gone. So every time I suggested that as a possibility in earlier videos, forget all that. Our Grand Arena Omicron, we can't use it up against GLs. Whenever Crosshair is inflicted with a debuff, cleanses and gains 5% offense stacking that maxes to 100%. And whenever a Bad Batch ally with target practice uses a special ability, Crosshair is going to assist. We will return to this as we go through the kit because that is an important point. This is definitely a good Omicron. He assists all the time and he's going to be gaining offense, but do not put this Omicron on until the squad is ready. With his kit, we'll see it later, there are now 3 characters within these fugitive Bad Batch characters that have a condition within their kit that is affected by relic levels, and presumably they're going to be much better at high relic levels because of those conditions. So there's not going to be as much value in this Omicron until later levels, when you have the time and resources to invest them into those relics. That's when I would be considering putting on this Ami. But that doesn't mean ignore the squad. I do think it is critical for all players to go for Gear 11 as soon as possible. That gives you huge access and benefits in Conquest in particular. But also, we are going to get a new raid at some point, and until we know otherwise, we need to assume that it is going to be utilizing these newer characters like these mercenary Bad Batch fugitive characters. And while we may not be able to take those squads up to high relics for the raid, we may be able to use them at lower relics in the raid while we are working on gathering resources, at least for us free-to-play players like myself. Our basic ability, a hit or a miss. Physical damage to the target enemy 3 times and inflict them with defense down. That's unevadable, unresistible. If the attack misses, inflict expose for 2 turns, and that's unevadable and unresistible. So 2 things to keep in mind here. Because of Shaken, early in the battle, his basic will consistently apply expose because he's going to have very low accuracy in the beginning stages. As the Shaken goes away, the expose mechanic will diminish and gets replaced with more damage. Second item is the Omicron. When players with target practice use a special, Crosshair is going to assist. And therefore, we have another mechanic that is inflicting more expose in the early turns of the battle when he assists, which also, as Shaken gets removed, that's going to turn into that physical damage where he's applying that 3 times physical damage on those assists. Our first special, I will handle it. This is a cooldown of 3. Physical damage to the target enemy, dealing 10% more damage for each relic level Crosshair has. Call the target Bad Batch ally to assist, dealing 50% more damage. And this is what I alluded to during the discussion of the Omicron. Here's a third data point related to relics for the squad. This will incentivize higher relics on Crosshair, and this likely means that the utility of the squad in general is going to be lower at lower relic levels, and probably not very useful at all before relics. If Crosshair was the target ally, he is not called to assist and instead removes 6 stacks of Shaken and stuns the target enemy for 1 turn. So we have options here. Early in the battle, we will definitely want to be removing those stacks of Shaken as quickly as possible, although I think we're only going to use this in most cases once on himself, and then we will shift over to using it to call the assist. But we can't forget though that this is also a stun. So there might be situations even in later in the battle where we might find the stun more preferable than the assist. The last portion here, if the ally fugitive is the leader, and target enemy took damage from a Bad Batch ally's attack on the previous turn, reduce the cooldown of target secured by 1. Now this is a component that I think is going to be in place in most situations. It does mean that you probably want to have your speeds pretty tight on this squad, at least on several characters, because what you're looking for is a situation where the enemy is not taking a turn before Crosshair goes. That should be easier later in the battle because the squad has a bunch of speed mechanics. They're going to be taking a bunch of turns. It shouldn't be too difficult to ensure, which will be important because the next special, Target Secured, has a big cooldown of 8. So we need to get through that as quickly as possible. This will make sure that we get to utilize this ability multiple times during an encounter. Crosshair gains 200% critical damage with this ability until the end of his turn, physical damage to the target enemy, and inflict armor shred until the encounter end, and this attack deals 50% more damage based on the number of turns by enemies and Crosshair before Target Secured is used again, and that maxes out at 500%. The attack can't be evaded and can't be used if Crosshair is shaken. So the thing that I want to highlight is the component where damage will be based on the number of turns taken by the enemies and Crosshair before this ability is used again. We want situations where we go through several turn cycles before we utilize this ability to maximize the damage. Now, either we're going to wait for that to happen, or we're going to affect that by modding. We might have a situation where we want the rest of the squad to be fast, and Crosshair can be a little slower in order to make sure some of these things occur, or the timing of how and when we use the first special, we just need to think about if our opponent took turns before we use the first special. But in most cases, I think we're just going to use Target Secured when available, and we'll just be doing whatever damage we happen to do based on the number of turns that are taken. But the other component to keep in mind is the mechanics of target practice itself, which we have not revisited in a while. But target practice from Omega's kit, that is extra critical chance and offense and critical damage per stack. And as that is increasing throughout the battle, we will see all of the characters benefit from those stacks of target practice becoming more and more offense oriented. And that will of course just help Crosshair even more as the damage dealer on the squad. This ability, his basic, his other special, all doing more damage. Now with Crosshair's gear, this is actually pretty interesting because we usually start at gear 7. Take a look at this. There are no Kairos at 7, 8, 9, 10. We usually see 2 to 3 Kairos at those levels. Instead, we only have 2 at gear 11, which means almost all players are going to be able to take Crosshair up to gear 11 immediately. There is no delay on this guy unless you're like early game. His gear 11 to 12, that's pretty easy other than 2 Kairos, but overall this is one of the easiest characters to gear up to gear 12 of any character released since the introduction of Kairos. Then Gear 12 to Relics, it's a little bit harder, but it's not that bad. I would say it's slightly above average. He has the Chiroprod finisher, which is a little bit more expensive. Then he has a bunch of Nubian scanners, both the purple and the gold. But other than that, it's not too bad. It could be worse, definitely above average, but manageable. So overall what we get is an incredibly easy low gear character and a slightly above average character from 12 to Relics. With our squad synergies, only a couple things I want to highlight in terms of how they relate back to Crosshair's kit. The first one, of course, is target practice, and that comes from Fugitive's leadership ability learned by watching. Now with Crosshair's kit, what that does, again as a reminder, is it is removing stacks of Shaken, and thus that accuracy penalty, and also awarding Crosshair a turn meter gain. With the rest of the squad, you're gaining that extra offense, everybody is, from those stacks of target practice, but it was also a conditional thing related to getting characters out of captivity. When in another squad they would just be eliminated from the board, instead with this squad they enter captivity where you can rescue them by gaining those stacks of target practice very quickly. That doesn't happen all the time. It's something you could also potentially maybe ignore. It's more of a savior mechanic with extra steps. Now it is critical because we need to turn Crosshair into a damage dealer. So think of it as like a payout or getting a character out of exile, where now Crosshair enters a new status once Shaken is removed, where Crosshair becomes an offensive threat. Now, the other mechanic is marked, because with Crosshair's unique ability, Crosshair will be able to have 100% accuracy when targeting a character who is marked. I believe, though, that is only on the bonus turn. So, when Shaken is removed, Crosshair gains that bonus turn, and you, during that turn, can hopefully use the second special, that big attack ability, and ensure that your opponent can't dodge that. And we can land it and make sure we inflict that big damage. Marked gets applied with Piercing Howl, but also, if it's not already on the board, Hunter can apply it with Take a Shot. But if it's already there, Take a Shot does other things. Now, like the original Bad Bat Squad, this Mercenary Bad Bat Squad has a lot of synergies. Check out the other videos for how some of the other components interact. These are a complicated squad. We will need to just play around with it to get a little bit more comfortable, but I do think it's going to be pretty important at the higher levels. I think with this captive mechanic, it could be a major annoyance on defense, or maybe it's not going to be a good defensive squad because it requires too much hand-holding, but I'm getting the feeling that maybe it won't. I'm hoping it turns into, well, maybe I'll regret saying this, because maybe it's just going to be super annoying on defense and I'm going to hate it. Otherwise, though, I do think it's going to be critical to territory battles, especially those later waves that are very difficult to get through. I can see this squad, particularly with the Ami, not having too much issue at all getting through some of those late waves. So I am very happy to be done with this squad, and we can move on to whatever comes next. Hopefully we get some raid information. Maybe we're going to see the squad pieces that fall into Jocasta's kit, or whatever the next GL is going to be. And it's a little early for that. We'll probably get something first beforehand. But we know already that Jocasta new is going to be critical to that next squad. So we will have a Jocasta new kit reveal coming out sometime later this week, now that we have other things out of the way. Also a roster update video. And then we're just wrapping up Grand Arena before we have that next phase of Conquest. So thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everybody. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.